Ever since Michael Brown, white supremacists have been telling us that hands up, don't shoot is just a myth. That no cop would ever shoot a black person who has their hands up. That this simply never happens and never happened. Now, this is the lie that many white supremacists and practically all of the white media has been pushing for the last few years, ever since Ferguson. When the video of the murder of Walter Scott came out, however, most of those professional deniers became real quiet for a while because that one incident proved every word they'd said to be lies. And here's another one. Charles Kinsey, a resident of North Miami, Florida, who works as a therapist at a group home for the mentally disabled. One of his patients suffers from extreme autism and, according to the man who owns the facility, only has an IQ of about 40. Well, that makes him twice as smart as any cop in America.
I got a call and saying that one of my employees was shot.
And when Clinton Bauer arrived on the scene, not only was an employee shot, his 24-year-old client who has extreme autism had been taken into custody.
And I said, what is he in police custody for? Oh, for his own protection. I said, what are you protecting him against? They said, well, he was acting kind of, loopy. And I said, what does loopy mean? I said, he's autistic. He has an IQ of 40. He's nonverbal. He can't speak. So, they stopped sharing much information with me at that point.
Bauer operates 5 group homes in North Miami. He says this is not the first time police have had contact with one of his clients.
I offered to provide them training. I actually offered this 2 years ago because I had another individual at that group home that got tased by the police.
Bauer says the training never happened, and he wants everyone to know one thing about his employee, caretaker Charles Kinsey, who was shot.
My employee's a hero. He not only put his own life at risk to protect that autistic individual, he did everything he was supposed to do, everything anybody is ever trained to do to prevent that from happening, and he still got shot.
The 24-year-old was holding a toy truck during the incident.
People with autism don't respond to commands in a normal way. He didn't get down.
A toy truck.
A toy truck. And you could see it was a toy truck. You can't even mistake it for a weapon.
The patient had gone outside, and some of the neighbors saw him acting strangely. Apparently, these people didn't know that they lived next to a group home for the mentally disabled. Charles Kinsey was trying to get the young man to go back inside when the police arrived. According to the North Miami's clearly doctored statement, somebody had called the police claiming that one of the men had a gun. It was actually a toy truck. Charles Kinsey, realizing that the death squad had shown up, immediately laid flat on his back on the ground with his hands up. As he saw it, surely if he was already on the ground, the police wouldn't shoot. After all, don't ignorant retards like Stephen Molyneux, a professional racist, tell us that hands up, don't shoot is a myth? Doesn't David Clark, tell us constantly that hands up, don't shoot simply didn't happen in Ferguson and wouldn't happen anywhere? Doesn't Sean Hannity and Bill the Bigot O'Reilly make their daily bread by lying day in and day out that Michael Brown was shot not because he had his hands in the air? Don't racist scum like Crocker Shit Dumb D tell us that hands up, don't shoot is just black people making excuses for their own criminality? On a side note, there's a reason why incest is illegal, though I suppose not everyone has gotten the memo. But I digress. Well, this man was videotaped with his hands up, lying flat on the ground, and the police still shot him. And when he asked why, they said they didn't know why. This was attempted murder that happened just a couple of days ago, and we are only now just hearing about it and getting some of the sketchy details. You know, when the Dallas shooting went down, the Dallas PD had information out to the public instantly, in seconds, while the shooting was happening. Same for Baton Rouge. When the police see a crime that someone outside of the department commits, all of a sudden they can figure out how to give the public blow-by-blow coverage as it happens. But when the police are caught committing a crime, all of a sudden everything has to go behind closed doors, and they can't release any details to the public. The people just have to trust them because, as the cops put it, they want answers too. That's why they don't release the would-be murderer's name. Yep, the police don't want to taint the investigation by putting any prejudicial statements out there. Except this one.
The officer that shot Charles Kinsey, the PBA says, by mistake, is a decorated SWAT team member, and he released this statement through the PBA. I took this job to save lives and help people. I did what I had to do in a split second to accomplish that, and I hate to hear others paint me as something I am not.
So, the would-be murderer is able to address the public after all, though he still doesn't say why he tried to murder Charles Kinsey. And with evidence this damning, it's no surprise that the local chapter of the Pig Patrol is running for cover. They gave one 60-second blink-and-you'll-miss-it so-called press conference where they denied everything, promised a full investigation, and then immediately handed the entire matter over to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Already they're trying to move this as far away from the local community as possible. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement has never, to my knowledge, arrested a cop, much less carried out an investigation that led to a conviction of a cop. This is no different than what the Baton Rouge and the Minneapolis police departments did when they handed over the murder cases of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile to the FBI. This is how they're doing a high-tech cover-up these days, by moving the investigation as far from the local voters as possible. This is about controlling the political fallout by turning the focus to someone outside of the local voter area, someone who the voters can't get to easily and can't vote out of office. Now that the foot soldiers of white supremacy are in the hot seat, they've begun a habit of hiding behind their political masters' skirts. The police chief can be fired if the voters put pressure on the mayor, but who do you put pressure on when the so-called Department of Law Enforcement is covering up an attempted murder, or when the FBI is aiding and abetting those murderers? And a year or so later, the matter will be quietly buried when James the Klansman Comey says that yet again he just can't make a case. Keep in mind, this is yet another police shooting of a black man caught on video, and James Comey himself said that he wants to stop the public from being able to videotape the police, even when they do wrong. This, however, will be the state equivalent of the same song and dance, and no matter what this cowgirl clown says, she's not going to follow up on anything. This political whore could barely express herself at the press conference, though she did make sure to be front and center for the cameras. She has no interest whatsoever in equal opportunity. Her focus is a photo opportunity. She's one of the baby boomer political sellouts who Generation Fail has been letting stay in office for years and years without having to produce a damn thing for black people. If there actually was a functioning system of justice in the United States, that bastard James Comey would be the first FBI director to ever do time. And this clown would be right behind him. As this latest example of the police's race war against black people plays out, you'll notice that, as usual, not one police officer in the entire United States is standing with Charles Kinsey. Not one of these scumbags in the North Miami PD is standing with Kinsey and his family and the community either. Not even one. Out of 900,000 police in America, not even one is willing to break ranks. The biggest street gang on earth is the American police. And the most stringent form of a no-snitch policy is in the police departments. Even Cosa Nostra had a few defectors. The police never have one. Now who are the real criminals? Because these are the same bastards who whine like a pig under a gate when a police shooting happens and the public doesn't stand with them. They've noticed that after Dallas and Baton Rouge, the protests continued without skipping a beat. The police simply couldn't understand it. Didn't the public know that 8 police officers had been killed? Yes, the public knew it, and they don't care. The public's hearts do not bleed for the police, and the cops just can't figure it out. Well, as I've always said, there's simply no way to fix stupid. The Police Malevolent Society isn't offering to help the investigation. I guess they figured the department had the cover-up well in hand, though the PBA did offer their own bizarre explanation for the attempted murder of Charles Kinsey.
It appeared to the officers that the white male was trying to do harm to Mr. Kinsley. This is not a case of a rogue cop. This is not a case of police abuse. This is a case where a police officer was trying to save Mr. Kinsley's life, and unfortunately, his shot went astray.
That's right. That's their explanation. They were trying to kill the other unarmed man. Like most police departments, the North Miami PD is staffed with a broad assortment of racist, misfits, morons, rejects, and outright idiots. Clearly, brains isn't what gets you a job in that department. The police are tying themselves in knots, trying to come up with one crackpot lie after the other. Well, if the police were truly trying to rescue Mr. Kinsey, then why did they put him in handcuffs and leave him face down on the pavement for 20 minutes bleeding out while the ambulance was arriving? Now, before we go any farther, I want to make sure that we hit this next point nice and hard. The badge-wielding thug who tried to murder Charles Kinsey is now being partially identified, and he's a Hispanic. This should come as no surprise to those in intelligent black society. There's been a tsunami of racial scandals in Florida's police departments the last few years, mostly surrounding racist text messages. These have all been pretty much the same, police making a torrent of racial remarks and racist threats about black people. Many of them aiming their hatred and vitriol at black police officers who they work with. And you won't be surprised to learn that many of the police who have been caught in these racism scandals are Hispanic. So when you hear about Alva Brazil being murdered by 2 Hispanic police in Houston, or Philandro Castile being murdered by a Hispanic police in Minneapolis, don't even act surprised. The idiots who used to tout a black-brown alliance have been increasingly harder to find as of late. If it's not Jennifer Lopez saying that all lives matter, or Selena Gomez running interference for other racists with her own sly, bigoted remarks, it's Hispanic race soldiers murdering black men left and right in the streets. And please don't even try any crap about how Hispanics aren't white. Some of the worst white supremacists aren't white people. Ain't that right, David Clark? The Hispanics' own culture of anti-black racism is very well documented on my other channel and many others. The media is not trying to cover this event. I suppose if they did, people who have been sitting on the fence since Dallas would begin to rethink some things. But I, for one, want to see the morons who said hands up, don't shoot is a myth. Yet another example of a black man who nearly died with his hands up, telling the police not to shoot. But as you look at the comment sections of videos and online news sites, the white supremacists are astonishingly silent. You could count all of them on one hand now. They don't seem to want to speak all of a sudden. Well, since those cowardly bastards are too shy to say anything, I'm sure they won't mind if we do all the talking then.